Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we've got antennas sticking up from the desk, and that can mean only one thing. We've got a wireless router to look at. We've got the new ASUS RT-AC88U, and this is a really nice product. And don't get distracted by all these antennas that they keep marketing at us, because we're at a point now where the router makers are making stuff that our hardware that connects to it doesn't support. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about wireless speed. We are going to test it, but the reality is that this is, for the most part, going to perform just as well with the same amount of range that an AC wireless router did a year ago. If you've got stuff in your house that eats wireless signals in the walls or whatever, you're not going to get any better range out of this than you might out of a router you bought a year ago. So I think if you have an AC router that you're happy with, stick with it, because the speeds on the wireless side are not going to improve by buying this, but there are a number of things that might, especially if you have a lot of traffic going on inside of your house. And that is because this has a pretty fast processor on board, a dual-core Broadcom 1.4 gigahertz processor, a Cortex A9 chip, 512 megs of DDR3 RAM. So it's really becoming quite a robust little server, running with a pretty quick little processor with a ton of memory that can move data back and forth out of that processor very quickly. And that will allow a lot of features that we're going to look at to work very efficiently. It's also got some other features that are rather interesting, including a USB 3.0 port here in the front. It's got some network attached storage features, so you can plug in a hard drive and share files and serve media, as well as make it work as a print server, and even connect a cellular modem to it. So if your internet goes down, you can seamlessly switch over to a wireless modem if you have one, and we'll show you how that works in a few minutes too. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. The print serving that it can do, unfortunately, is very basic, so you can't have it translate to the Google Cloud Print format or anything like that, but it does do very well serving basic printer functions on your network. If you have an older printer, you can just plug the USB into here or the USB port on the back and be able to share your printer that way, but it doesn't do more than that. It's not a cloud-based kind of print sharing feature. On this side, you've got two buttons here. You've got an LED button to turn off the blinking lights here if that's annoying you. You also have a Wi-Fi kill switch that if you have somebody unauthorized on your network, you can just push that button in and disable all the Wi-Fi radios to knock off somebody who is not authorized to be on your network. And that's a quick way to just hit the panic button, short of turning the router off, if you need to get somebody off of your router really quickly. What I really like about this is the fact that we've got 8 gigabit Ethernet ports here on the back. This is more than I've seen on many routers. Most only have 4, so this is really nice to have this many ports available. If you have a network attached storage device that supports link aggregation, this will support it, only on ports 1 and 2, unfortunately. But if you've got a lot of people hitting your network attached storage, you can actually serve a 2 gigabit link to the rest of your network. Of course, everyone's still connecting at 1, but if you have a lot of demand on those files, you can give it a little bit more bandwidth out the back of your NAS device by aggregating these 2 ports together. The higher end WD MyClouds, as well as the QNAPs and the Synologies, all support that feature. And if it's something that you find of use, this is kind of nice to have this built into your router. You don't have to have an additional switch next to it. The rest of these ports are just standard gigabit ports. You also have a gigabit port for your WAN connection there as well, to plug into your cable or telephone provider. You have a power for input here, your power button over there, your reset switch over there, and your WPS button to link up with a faster pairing if you don't want to go through the rigmarole of typing in passwords. This is disabled by default, which is actually nice to see, because this can sometimes be a security issue. And on the back here is another USB port. This is a USB 2.0 port. This one will support all the same features as that other port does, just a little bit slower. So I'm going to get this thing plugged in. We're going to test out a couple of things on it, including its speed with standard 2x2 wireless AC, because that's the only thing that I have that I can actually test here. At least that's the fastest connection my computers support. We're also going to look at the network attached storage function on here, as well as its connectivity to cellular modems too. Lots of things to look at, so let's boot it up. So here we are on the front page of the control panel for the router. If you have used an ASUS router in the past, this will look very, very familiar to you, but there are some new features which we'll definitely talk about as we're going through this. But I do like just the at-a-glance kind of approach that they have to things on here. So I can click on the status icon, for example. I can see how much RAM is available on the router, so I can see what impact perhaps some of these features that I'm implementing might have on its overall memory. But again, because we have 512 megs of RAM, it actually gives you a lot more room for some of the features that they have added to this particular router, which are very helpful. You can also adjust very quickly your wireless settings here. If you want to quickly change the password to the router, you have the ability to do that very, very quickly on here. The one thing I love about the ASUS routers is that they include an OpenVPN server and client. And what's nice about this is that OpenVPN, first of all, is a lot more secure than PPTP is, because there is a certificate as well as a password involved. And what's cool is that it's a great way to link two networks over the internet to each other. So you can have this one here and another one somewhere else, and you can actually connect your two networks together so everybody on each network can get to each other's computers, which is a very useful thing if you have a multi-site office or something and don't want to spend a fortune on some enterprise VPN solution. This will actually work pretty well. It's relatively secure and probably good for a small business. If you're a larger business, of course, I would recommend something more robust, but this is better than the basics that you might have on other routers, and it works quite well. It's also a great way that if you're off-site, or maybe you have a network-attached storage device somewhere, you can connect that device or an individual computer to your network in the same way. So you can go outside your network, connect in, and get access to everything like you would if you were sitting on your home office desk or something. So really very useful feature there. A couple things that are unique to this router. One is the traffic analyzer, and this is a neat feature I've been playing with all day today as I've been experimenting with the router here. And what's cool is that when you turn this on, it will monitor your network traffic and tell you not only who is using the most bandwidth, it picks the top 5 clients used for whatever time period you're looking, but also what they're doing. So this top one here is my iPhone. It's not currently connected, so it doesn't have a mapping to that MAC address. This is the physical address of its Wi-Fi connection. So if I have my iPhone connected right now, it would say iPhone up there. And it tells me that not only is this the top bandwidth consumer right now based on the pie chart, but also what I've been using with that device. So if you are in a workplace environment, for example, and somebody is torrenting during the day or something, and you want to knock them off that task, you can find out exactly who is consuming the most bandwidth and what it is they're doing. So you'll see here it knows that I was on YouTube and Facebook. Even though those are secure services, it knows the URL that I'm going to look at those services. So that's how it's able to see that. There's some other web traffic here that is just secured to various websites that it's not familiar with, so it'll just kind of lump those into the SSL option there. But there's also an MP3 download, which I did to grab a podcast off my iPhone earlier, and I can see what my MacBook was doing here as well. So a really neat little feature. You can then go in and dig a little further, so you can pick specific clients off a list here and see when they were most active, when those things were happening, how much bandwidth they were consuming. So really useful stuff if you're really trying to figure out if somebody on your network is doing something bad. You can also aggregate all the app traffic together and see from all the clients which app is consuming the most bandwidth. Now, this is a router marketed towards gamers, which is why it's so angular and mean looking. And they have a feature called Game Boost that will attempt to get the traffic routed to your game servers in the most efficient way possible, especially if you are sharing your network with other people. And there's some interesting stuff that they have on here. They have, first thing is this service called WTF Fast, which is they call it a GPN, a gamer private network. It's essentially a VPN, but what it can let you do is basically specify a device on your network that it will route to this service, which will then get you over, presumably, faster to one of the major gaming servers that you might be trying to connect to. It's a hit or miss kind of thing. I think if you are having issues that you know are nothing to do with your router or your wireless connection and have everything to do with your ISP, then this might be something that could help you. It is free for one device, but if you want to add multiple devices, you have to pay for the subscription service to add additional ones there. But what's nice about this is that it works without a client. So the router here essentially acts as the client, and it looks for traffic that your device generates. But one thing you might want to try first is the LAN boost. And what this is a way of very quickly specifying which packets should get priority on your network. So what will happen is when you implement this, you'll get a little game controller icon up here. You click on that, you go to change priority mode, and what it's nice is that there's a couple of ways to look at this prioritization of traffic. This is also called QoS, or quality of service. So they have a one-click option here where you can say, all right, I'm playing games, so any game traffic I want to go over the network faster, or if you want to specify web surfing is the primary activity, you can click on that. You have the ability to go over here to customize, and you can drag things around here to get a custom setting that will prioritize things based on how you set them. And this is all preset stuff, so it's knowing to look for certain destinations for the data or the certain originating device to kind of know exactly what you're trying to do. It's not going to be perfect, but it will allow you to do things very simply from a quality of service standpoint. This is a nice improvement to see this feature getting a little bit better to understand. But you can also go in and do it in the traditional way where you go ahead and specify the amount of bandwidth that you have and then go in and try to manually set which devices do what. But it is a little bit easier sometimes to just be able to click on a one-click thing to make it work. But you can go even further if you want to and say, all right, the MacBook only gets this amount of bandwidth and that's it, to limit perhaps somebody barging in on your bandwidth. What's been interesting is that I've typically been the biggest bandwidth consumer in my house, but now that I have a daughter who watches a lot of her educational stuff on Netflix, she is now consuming most of the bandwidth in this house, so I could limit how often she barges into the things that I'm doing, especially if I want to do a live stream or something. I can deprioritize her device or the things that she's doing and prioritize my network stream out to YouTube or something like that. So they've really been getting much better at simplifying how all of this stuff works. Another thing I want to show you is the USB application, because this is where you can connect devices up to your USB ports on there. So I have right now my 3G, 4G modem plugged into the USB port. I've specified that it's on, and I have a USB modem, but you can also connect an Android phone via USB and have your Android phone be the modem essentially. So if you do have the tethering service enabled, I believe you need to have that. You can plug the Android phone into the router if your internet ever goes down and get everybody back up again through your phone. You will consume your bandwidth, of course, but it is a way in an emergency to get that done very quickly. And what's really cool, if you go over back over here to this dual WAN setting here, you can actually have that work as a failover. So your primary network is your cable or internet provider that you're doing via the WAN, but you could have the USB be the secondary one, and that is exactly what we have right now, that I have it in failover mode. I don't have an internet connection into that WAN port at the moment, so if I go back to our network map, you can see that my primary WAN is disconnected, but my secondary, the little internet dongle I have here, is taking over, and it's been working great. So a very nice seamless way to have an emergency backup if you want on your network. And again, just all those things that we just saw here, just kind of the tip of the iceberg on this device. And that's one of the things that ASUS has done, I think, better than most router manufacturers that we've looked at so far, is that they really have quite a feature set that makes this a very, very useful router from the standpoint of having the VPN integrated, having all this failover stuff integrated. Things that you might see on more expensive, more enterprise level kind of stuff are in here. And I think for most home users and home office users, it's good enough to get things done that you really can't get done on other brands of routers that cost the same or more. All right, so we saw how that back port was good for using our cellular modem as a backup, and now we're going to see how the front port does with a solid state drive attached to it. So what's going to happen now is we're going to try to use the router as a network attached storage device, and I have my Mac here connected to the router via gigabit Ethernet, and we're going to compare this speed that we're about to see with what we might see from a modern network attached storage device. I'm going to start our usual disk speed test here from Blackmagic, and you can see on the right side we're writing to that solid state disk connected to the router over gigabit Ethernet at a speed of about 30 to 35 megabytes per second and reading at around 50 megabytes per second. Now this drive, if it was plugged directly into my Mac via USB 3, could do 400 megabytes in both directions. Typical speed we see over gigabit Ethernet to a modern NAS device is about 100 megabytes per second. So this is about half of what you would expect out of a NAS device, but it is actually a functional read and write speed for basic stuff. So if you're not transferring videos or watching a lot of movies or whatever, you could probably get by with this as a file store. And if you had just a little USB stick or something you wanted to throw in the front of this this router, would actually probably work very well as a network attached storage device without having to buy a separate product to accomplish that file sharing task if that's all you're after. So I think we're going to start seeing more of these features from routers start to creep into the network attached storage territory, if you call it that, and we may actually see the reverse happen on the NAS side, where these NAS devices may start acting like routers also. I think we're seeing a real convergence here as processor speeds and overall innovation in this space continues to pick up. So we'll have to see what happens in the next year if one of these routers could serve files as fast as a network attached storage device does. But this is definitely a lot better than what I've seen in the past, and I think we're only going to see it get better. So the next thing we're going to do is see how fast the wireless speeds are. We're going to leave this Mac connected via gigabit Ethernet. We're going to grab my MacBook, which has a 2x2 AC wireless card built in, and we're going to transfer files wirelessly to the Mac and see how fast we can get them there over the air. All right, so we are connecting my MacBook here to the router via wireless AC. You'll see our transmit rate is at 867 megabits per second. That lines up, for the most part, with 2x2 AC wireless, which is the radio that this has built into it. So we are looking at a current generation MacBook. That's it, 2x2 AC wireless. This can support 3x3 and, of course, that 1024 format that nobody supports just yet. Even my Microsoft Surface Book back there, a flagship Windows computer, only has a 2x2 radio. So this is about the extent of what you're going to see. Now what's going to happen here is that this little MacBook is going to transmit the data wirelessly to the router. The router will then take that data, push it out via the gigabit Ethernet cable back here, and have it go into my MacBook here, which is also on the desk. And we're going to see how fast that data makes that trip. So let's go over to my test here, and we'll run this real quick and see what kind of speeds we get. And as you can see here, we're getting speeds in the upper 500 megabit per second territory, which is actually pretty good. Now, we're in ideal circumstances. There isn't much distance between the MacBook and the router, but we are seeing some really good wireless speeds here under ideal circumstances, and it looks like 562 megabits per second is the average that we saw over the course of that test. So I think, from the standpoint of wireless speed, it is great, but it's just as great as many of the routers that we've looked at over the last year or so, seeing very similar speeds that we saw out of those, primarily because this is the maximum speed that this laptop and just about every other laptop out there can transmit at. So again, if you are looking for a router, really focus on the features you saw here versus the need for greater wireless speed, because if you already have an AC wireless router and most of your clients are AC clients, you're not going to see any real improvement in wireless connectivity than you may already have. If you don't have an AC router, then certainly stepping up to an AC router will make a difference, provided that all of your clients that are connecting to it also support wireless AC. And you should definitely go in, look at all the specification sheets for the devices that you have and see if they do. If so, then you might see a better boost in wireless performance. But if not, and you already have an AC router, most likely you're not going to see anything really different with this one. Now, one last thing to talk about is firmware updates. They will not always tell you when there is one available for this through the control panel. I just checked on this a little earlier today. It said I was on the current version, yet when I go to the ASUS website, there is a non-beta current version of firmware available that is a later date than the one that is currently installed on this one. So you probably want to go once a month to the ASUS website and just check to make sure that there isn't a newer firmware available, because there's so many open source libraries being used on this thing that get updated all the time, and you definitely want to keep up with those firmware updates, and the control panel doesn't always tell you that. So definitely be on the lookout for that. If what you just saw is nothing what you need, I do suggest then looking at the Google On-Hub routers. There is one from TP-Link, and there's also now one from ASUS. They are very easy turnkey solutions that update themselves. You don't have to really do much of anything with them. They just kind of run in the background. So if you're not a huge gamer or a huge networking person, those might be easier ones to look at. You can see my review of that one that I did a little while ago. I'm definitely recommending that one for regular consumers, but for enthusiasts, this is probably the best one you can get at the moment until I see something better. But right now, I'm sticking with this one. This is Lon.TV, and thanks for watching. This channel is brought to you by the generosity of my Patreon supporters. If you find the channel helpful, you too can contribute for as little as $1 a month. Visit Lon.TV/Patreon to learn more.